Hello and welcome, wherever you are in the world. This is Eat at Home, the newscast of the global food transformation. I'm Natalie Becker-Okovic, and today's episode is about farmers, fishers and food producers, the real heroes of our food system, deserving a much fairer share. Here are some highlights. We'll visit farmers in Bolivia and Ethiopia. We'll go to Sierra Leone with the Elbas to learn lessons from another pandemic. From the coast of Chile to the Bay of Bengal, we'll dive into the wonders of the blue world, a priceless part of our food system. And the North Sea is where our awesome studio chef Emilie will look for inspiration for a new take on a classic dish. Later on, Eat's founder Gunhild Stordalen meets up with the CEO at Care, Michelle Nunn. And no Eat at Home episode is complete without a stop by the Fab Lab. Stay tuned to see what Professor Fabrice cooks up today. If we are truly committed to fixing our broken food systems, then we have to get to the heart of the matter. So today, we are taking you on a journey to the fields and the farms where food producers, the ones who actually produce 70% of the world's food, those who truly feed us all, are those who struggle the most to get their fair share.
In Tigray, Ethiopia, everyone is happy when there is rain in the forecast. Climate change has led to the drought season becoming even longer. This left vegetable farmers like Molak with little access to water nearby, which meant for months, every year, she had no water to irrigate her crops. Without crops, she had nothing to sell at the market. Plenty of different crops to sell has led to a dramatic increase in her income and quality of life, for her and for her family.
It's the annual potato planting ceremony in the village of Mishkamayu in Bolivia. Across the country, Bolivia's staple food is in danger. Potatoes originated here in the Andes, and the area boasts more than 4,000 different varieties. But changes in the climate are taking their toll.
Before, the variation in temperatures and in the climate were not that dramatic. Before, the rain came when it was supposed to, and at that time the potatoes would already be big. But now there is nothing.
With the failure of the crops, it's hard for young people to see a future here.
If it would only rain, there would be pastures again, and the youngsters would not leave the community.
The outlook for this community may seem bleak, but there is hope. Today, Mario is doing an audit of what traditional techniques the local farmers are using to adapt to climate change. They show Mario the system they have developed to create communal compost.
We want to plant forests and build greenhouses to keep our children here so they don't leave for other countries.
Now let's hear from an expert. What is at stake when the world's smallholder farmers lose out? With us, we have Maaike van Ginneken from IFAD. Welcome, Maaike.
It is a scandal that those who feed us often go hungry themselves. When I think of small-scale producers, I think of the many smart female farmers I've met. Strong women in Senegal and the Central African Republic, from Nicaragua to India. These women are few of the 700 million people that still live in extreme poverty. So what's holding them back? Only a tiny fraction of the retail price we pay for food reaches farmers. And lack of access to natural resources holds them back. These women have tiny plots of land. And if you do not have access to a way to store water, even a relatively short dry spell without rain can destroy your harvest for the year. Lack of access to market holds these women back. If you do not own a vehicle, you depend on traveling salesmen, and they often will pay you a price well below market prices. And it's lack of access to capital that holds these women back. Male and female farmers have the smarts to overcome many of the challenges, but they need money to invest in digging a pond, in buying a chicken pen, in buying better seeds. So what do we need to do to help these billions of rural poor out of poverty? First, let's listen to farmers and let's recognize that they're smart, innovative entrepreneurs. All solutions are local and farmers know their locality better than most. When I speak to farmers, one of the things they ask for is for know-how to diversify their business beyond the farm. 80% of value creation in food systems is beyond the farm gate, in processing, in storing, in distributing and retailing food. Diversification of income beyond farming delinks the destiny of farmers from access to land, and it makes them more climate resilient. The second thing I hear from farmers, young and old, female and male, is that they need access to capital and to markets. So let's help banks to provide credits to farmers, and let's help farmers to organize so that they can jointly access capital. Also, we need to recognize that governments need money to invest in public goods, such as irrigation, roads, and extension services. And we need to reform trade systems so that there's a level playing field for all entrepreneurs, regardless of the size of their enterprise or their country of origin. We live in a rapidly changing world, and these changes provide business opportunities. Consumers demand and are willing to pay for more nutritious, more diverse, and higher quality food products. And also climate adaptation and climate mitigation provides new jobs and business opportunities in solar panels, in better seeds, in water pumps. These are all business opportunities for farmers. They're all business opportunities for the rural poor. By 2050, we, the world, need to feed 10 billion people while protecting our planet. Nobody should be left behind, and certainly not the people that produce our food. We need to radically change our food systems, and farmers are at the heart of that radical change. Let's provide the rural poor, the women and men that live in rural areas in developing countries, with the means to build their livelihoods. Let's provide them with the means to feed us all.
Clearly, this is one of the most important conundrums of food: how to keep our foods affordable while ensuring that farmers are paid a fair share. We're talking about the economics of food. With us is Joe Robertson, a senior advisor to EAT on sustainable finance, who has served as interim director for the startup of the Food Systems Economics Commission. Joe, welcome. Can you tell us, why do we need a new economics of food?
We want everybody to have access to nutrition. We want everybody to have good health and a long life and sustainable well-being. But our food systems are undermining biodiversity, destroying habitat. They're leading to 11 million premature deaths per year that are preventable. We have many people view this as a time where we're living through a pandemic of non-communicable diseases, dietary diseases. All of those things are driven by the way our economy is structured, and the actors within our food system that take the biggest benefits, the most rewards, are industrializing, concentrating, and highly processing food that leads to all of these problems. So what we end up with is a food system where healthy food is more expensive, the cheapest, most available food is not as nutritious, and many of the people who grow food cannot even afford an everyday diet that keeps them at their best.
What would the world look like if we succeed in creating a healthy and sustainable and inclusive new economics of food?
A food system that works has to work for everyone. And one of the big deficits we have in the system we're in now is that we don't really value the agency of growers or consumers. And so we have this incentive structure that allows money to chase money and to accumulate wealth by essentially denying those people better choice. If we were able to invest in a way where everyone has better choices, we can surround people with better choices, and we value the agency of those people, meaning we make it easier for farmers to grow healthier food more sustainably without destroying the natural environment, and then to be rewarded for it. It would be easier to get that food to everyone at scale. That would allow us to have a healthier diet for everyone around the world at all levels of income. And I think that's the starting point, is to recognize that a food system that works has to be an economy where everyone has reliable access to healthy, sustainably grown food.
And thank you for your insights. Great that you will now stay on the line to lead a debate over this and to continue the conversation. So, Joe, over to you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Vera, maybe we can start with you and just ask the pretty straightforward question: why do we need a new integrated assessment of the economics of food? What's wrong with the economics of food as it is?
We have, I think, a couple of structural problems with the food system today. One is the imbalance of power in the food supply chains, and particularly, I think, as you will hear maybe later from Andrea as well, the links between, of course, rural communities that are essentially the main food producers, and then the value chains, which become increasingly financial. And I think, we remember all together, and all of us, 2008, 2009, where essentially, manipulations on the London Stock Exchange sent coffee prices on the continent skyrocketing and then crashing, and storage of rice in Philippines changed the sort of global supplies of rice overnight.
Ajay, in addition to your other roles, you're a farmer. I think a lot of people are surprised to find out that a large number of the people in the world who are undernourished live in rural communities that grow food. How is that possible?
I think it's the politics of food and food systems that's driving farmers to increasing dependence on markets for nutrition. While recognizing food value chains are important, as a farmer, I feel that investments need to be prioritized to improve nutritional self-reliance on the farm, building wet markets and community networks to improve nutrition. And the second point I would want to give on this is that there's a blind quest in the world to get affordable food for consumers. I mean, as a farmer, I don't have a problem with that, but it leads to a problem where majority of world's farmers are not receiving a fair price for the produce they send to the markets. And that's leading to poverty, that's leading to migrations, the largest migration in human history from rural areas to urban areas. And this is what's adding to the problem. And if farmers don't get paid the real cost of producing food, they're not going to adopt environmentally sustainable practices also.
Vera, as co-chair of the Food System Economics Commission, you're working on an assessment that not only examines the economics of food, but also puts health, environment, and inclusion on equal footing. Why is it important to put health, environment, and inclusion on the same level?
Now we are in the COVID crisis, right? So let's talk about the sign of the times. Many people will tell you that the COVID crisis is the result of zoonotic diseases, which come from, the link between sort of agriculture, food systems, and, our patterns of nutrition. So it is almost impossible not to bring those three things together. Of course, in the more developed world, there is a huge conversation around health, obesity, and food systems, what we eat and what we produce and how we process it. And so again, I think those two things cannot be divorced from each other. And the whole sort of preventive conversation around eating better foods, eating more organic foods, eating more sustainable foods. But that also goes back to the point that Ajay made in terms of making sure that farmers can actually eat what they produce in a way that is more sustainable. The second one on climate change, of course, again, on our continent, Africa, and the same is true for Southeast Asia, a lot of our agriculture still depends on rainfall. And because of climate change, we see, huge weather pattern changes, which means two things for us. One, it's changing fundamentally our diets because it's changing fundamentally what we grow and how we grow it, but it's also changing our market cycles and the resilience of our agriculture and our farmers. Agriculture is a huge contributor to global greenhouse emissions. And so the question again of how can we continue to feed ourselves in a sustainable manner becomes quite important. And there again, we'll begin to talk about the value chains, the supply chains, the logistics chains. Where in that value chain of food production do we see huge emissions? Can we reduce them? And that again is the conversation around more local consumption, more local production, and how we can ensure that we can adjust the demand and supply in a way that manages emissions of global greenhouse gases.
Ajay, the World Trade Organization has helped to develop a much more interconnected system of trade around the world, and it touches some of those dynamics Vera was mentioning there. Has that expansion of trade, diversification of trade benefited farmers and benefited small farmers? Has it helped to reduce their hardships? Or what kind of impact have you seen?
It's universally acknowledged that the food systems have collapsed, and that's why there is a UN Food Systems Summit to set that right. And there is also a growing drumbeat in the global south that WTO is responsible. If you even talk to farmers in Africa, in Asia, and much of the developing world, they have that feeling, and it's increasing day by day. And farmers also feel, and I feel with them, that global treaties are not sacrosanct. That they're made for the global good, but if we realize that they're not benefiting the majority of the people, there should not be a problem in changing it. Drive down cost of farm gate prices for farmers in importing nations, and they keep them in poverty in perpetuity. And that also leads to climate change, because farmers are not going to adopt environmentally sustainable practices when they can barely make their ends meet every season.
Is it fair to say that if we value the agency of people, the poor consumers, small farmers, we empower people to not only have better choices, but make better choices, that's going to essentially create a better situation for everyone?
You use the word agency. This whole conversation is really, I think, inscribed in another principle that the UN is pushing, which is moving from shareholders to stakeholders. And how can we make this whole food systems conversation a conversation around stakeholders that all have something to benefit as we go forward. So we're hoping that, as we look at this in a more equitable way, we may be able to come up with some suggestions that help us to redress some of the wrongs. But also, we've had a lot of innovations around food systems that we have not yet inserted into our daily habits, into our eating habits, and into our livelihoods that hopefully we can then bring in a more systematic way.
Thank you, Ajay, and thank you. Vera, for this very important discussion.
Are you hungry for a more just food system? Well, I think we all are, and so is Suzanne Barr. Not only is she an extraordinary chef, she's also a passionate social justice activist. And today, she's serving us up some inspiration.
Hey everybody, I'm Chef Suzanne Barr from Toronto, Canada. Very excited to be showing you guys what I'm working on today. I'm in the process of actually cleaning my sunchokes. I am going to be preparing a sunchoke hummus for this Friday. We are doing a meal, myself and Chef Joshna in Toronto. We are helping prepare a meal for a 5-course tasting meal for the Black Creek Community Farm. It's their fundraiser, their annual fundraiser. And it is an honor to be a part of their initiative there. And also it's an honor to be able to use the fresh, incredible vegetables from the farm, which I was at 2 days ago to pick up. It's gonna be an amazing dish. I can't wait to show you guys the process and talk to you guys a bit more about the work that I'm doing here in Toronto and the work that I feel is so important around Black, marginalized, Indigenous folks, newcomers, immigrants to Canada, and how I can do my part to be supportive and to keep the equity within this industry and keep it moving forward.
The investment in the livelihood, investing in the farmers, the growers, the drivers, the packagers, anyone that is working within the food world, those that we do not see behind the curtains, those that we do not see behind the doors. We learn about them because the food gets to our table, it gets to our doorsteps. And these are the people these are the individuals that we need to make sure that we're taking care of, that we're supporting. We're supporting their livelihood, not just financially, but also mentally, and also in a way where they're feeling supported with a real living wage that gives them access, a livelihood that gives them access to independence, and making them feel stronger, making them feel good about going to work, knowing that they're supporting so many lives and communities. I want to thank those and the EAT Forum for allowing me to come and share with you, telling you my story, showing you the Black Creek Community Farm and the work that I was able to do with them this year, and the amazing families that we'll be feeding today and tomorrow.
Any conversation about a fair food system would not be complete without talking about the animals. Our next speaker, Philip, is the global CEO of Compassion in World Farming. Let's see what he has to say.
Duke, come on. Good boy. Come on. Compassion in World Farming was founded way back in the 60s by a dairy farmer, Peter Roberts, who was concerned about the rise in factory farming, keeping animals caged, crammed and confined in conditions where they can't stretch their wings or even turn around. Not only is it the greatest source of animal cruelty on the planet, it's also a major driver of wildlife declines. It causes human hardship, disease, deforestation, soil erosion, marine pollution, and drives species as diverse as jaguars, elephants, and penguins to the brink of extinction. From those early beginnings, we've gone on to grow into an international organisation mobilising people to put pressure on governments across the world, working with the United Nations, and to persuade more than 1,000 companies, some of the biggest brand names in the world, to make game-changing commitments to a better way of keeping animals. In this age of pandemic, climate and nature emergency, it's so important that we find a better way of producing food, that we build back better so no one is left behind. And we can do that through regenerative agroecological means of farming, where we bring animals back to the land, where we integrate them with crops, where they're moving around rotationally, fertilizing the land naturally, so that we don't need all the chemical pesticides that are killing the countryside, and where animals can have a decent life, free from cages and confinement, where they can enjoy fresh air and sunshine. I've seen regenerative farming in action. Innovative farmers bringing landscapes to life, creating great food and having a thriving livelihood too. I've seen this in Mexico, where I've walked with pasture-based dairy farmers. Argentina, where cows have been out on lush grass. In America, Will Harris of White Oak Pastures. He used to be a factory farmer and he turned his back on it to put his animals back on the land. And then there's Tim May in England, who brought soil back to life on his farm by introducing grazing animals. And the great thing about this regenerative, restorative agriculture is that it doesn't need lots of money spent on it for expensive antibiotics, equipment, or chemicals. That is the way to build a real future for people, animals, and the planet. Let's join hands together in global action to build back better.
The current pandemic is not the first one to alter our lives. Not many years ago, across West Africa, Ebola served as a warning, but not many of us paid attention. Nevertheless, IFAD remained steadfast on the ground, helping farmers to recover. Last year, 2 IFAD Goodwill ambassadors, actor Idris Elba and model Sabrina Elba, traveled to Sierra Leone to see how the rural communities were recovering from that devastating epidemic.
Africa's been on our mind since we met. I think we're privileged to be able to come now at a point in our lives where we can do more to help.
There's a real sort of pressure point on what's happening to our environment globally. Climate change is making huge, huge impacts on hunger and starvation. People can't live if the temperature rises. We're at a pivotal point where actually we can change that by, the awareness that we create. In time, for us to prevent future generations from suffering. Africa's expanding and the population is going to double. So that little girl that's standing right there is going to be a grown woman, and her children will suffer unless we teach her how to cultivate.
Africa's population will go up from currently 1 billion to 2.4 billion in 2050, of which more than half will be young people.
This is some sort of dynamite waiting to go off. It is not properly managed. Most of these people are farmers. They are into agriculture. There is no other means. And it's not only in Sierra Leone. This is quite reflective of all of Africa.
Just getting a deeper understanding of how agriculture affects a community, a family. One of the ladies, Khadija Kamara, was just saying that she's very thankful because, from the time that IFAD came here to teach them, she can afford more. She can afford to give her kids schooling. She can afford to eat.
And also put things into perspective. I mean, it's been 2 years that IFAD's been helping Khadija. That's not a long time to make such a big change for her. It just goes to show what you can do, in the next 5, 10 years.
Yeah. And so that's a direct impact, IFAD's direct impact is literally just displayed to us. For us, maybe just sort of amplified why we're here, exactly. My dad's from here. He's from a village probably 10 miles from here. It's just a really, special time to be here. So it's been emotional. It's been educational.
We want to do everything we can to help organizations like IFAD and who are coming in and who really care and whose goals are to legitimately end poverty, because we can do it.
Now, as the world is fighting another virus, Sierra Leone may seem far away. But overcoming the Ebola epidemic also brought lessons to learn. Recently, our colleagues at IFAD reached out to Sabrina Elba to discuss just that.
Yeah, look, we obviously had an amazing visit to Sierra Leone. It was an IFAD trip. It's one that we'll never forget. I wish that every person could see how hardworking and hopeful these farmers are, and how the solution to ending hunger exists already. We know what works. We've talked to the people there. We just need citizens to learn more about these issues and our governments and leaders to invest in another way of ending global hunger, to not just give out aid. I've said before, I think the era of aid is dead. This requires investing in agriculture and small farmers to plant in a way that is sustainable and feasible for them. Obviously, the pandemic is making life so much harder for farmers across Africa, not even just Africa, in rural areas around the world. I recently heard from Istituto, and she is a small farmer that we met on our IFAD trip to Sierra Leone. Istituto, she has 4 children. They're no longer in school because she can't afford the fees. And they're having just one small meal a day. So obviously this is horrific. And she reminds me of my mom. Strong, resourceful, determined to give her children a better future, which is exactly what my mom did for us when she moved from Somalia to Canada. But she never lets us forget the things that we took for granted. School, food on the table, shoes, even. These things are being denied to too many children. And I think that's what we're really working to try and get people to emphasize with these children and to understand the situation, because to them, it's a reality and it's far too often taken for granted.
Someone whose homebrewed experiments and inventions you've all come to know and look forward to on this show has been cooking up something new and blue in his home-confined lab. I can't wait to see what it is. Can you?
Hi folks, welcome back to the Fab Lab. Today let's talk about blue foods.
Sounds fishy, Dad.
That's right, Chloe. This episode's going to be fishy. Water covers 71% of the Earth's surface, but produces less than 2% of our calories. Blue foods include fish like this sea bass, or like this red striped mullet. Because the fish are in low gravity environments, and because they're poikilothermic, cold-blooded, they're a very efficient way of producing protein that's good for people and for the planet. But that's just the start. There's more than 3,000 blue foods, like these mussels, a great source of iron, zinc, and other minerals like vitamin A, B12, or these scallops, a great source of low-fat, low-calorie protein.
Brackish ponds like this one make great wetland habitat, such as for these flamingos behind me. Also a great place to grow oysters, another low-fat, low-calorie protein. Delish.
Because they spend less energy fighting gravity with woody stems, and because they never suffer from drought, aquatic plants and algae grow incredibly fast.
In Belgium, our national dish is moule frites, or steamed mussels with fries. Belgian, by the way, not French. And a nice tall glass of beer. This is a great celebration food for like when Belgium wins the World Cup. Seriously, Chloe? But if I replace the beer for a glass of water and the fries for a nice plate of wakame, I now have a healthy diet that I could eat almost every day. So blue foods, as you can see, are a potentially huge game changer, allowing us to protect more environment and produce healthy diets. There's a big if, however. That's if we can produce more blue foods without more harm to the environment. No food was lost or wasted in making this video.
In the kitchen today, I'll be cooking some beautiful Norwegian mussels. And mussels and shell are a much more sustainable seafood option. And one of the reasons why is that mussels and shells, they feed off plankton, unlike farmed fish that often needs a lot of feed, and especially a lot of fish. And you know, that is food that could have gone to the growing human population. And that is why I will cook up some beautiful mussels, and they're so tasty, packed with nutrients, and actually quite easy to make.
Now, let's take a deep dive into the realm of aquatic foods. Fish, shellfish, and algae are often vital parts of healthy diets, and for many of the world's poorest, a key source of readily available protein. And it's also a source of employment. Let's continue our world tour to Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Alaska.
Ôn em biết thuộc lo ta con ca em biết cạn môi ha em biết cạn can ha đưa hạ nghiên mà lâu ra gian cạn luôn ha ôn em biết nhầm ôn nó xoay ôn ta phân ca vô ca cả băng nhỏ lúc à bát kia cả băng nhỏ lúc liên hầm ôn em biết cạn can ha giờ phụ cắt ở lo liên cạn can ha chỉ nhô cả mấy mà ôn chỉ nhô phụ cắt ở lâu chỉ nhô cả mấy mà ôn nhưng pui một chút cả mấy mà ôn cả là can ha cá này ha giờ là can mà can to lâu mà can to áo mà cay cả mồi hàng là cốt nông tana
আমি নদীতে যাই নদীতে জাল বাই নদীতে জাল বাইলে আমরা দশটা জাল একটা সাথে একটা বাইজা যায় কিন্তু নদীতে জাল বা স্বাদ লাগে না কিন্তু নদীতে আগের মতো মাছ পাই এর পাশাপাশি ইকোবস থেকে গরু দিয়ে ছাগল দিছে ওগুলো আমি এই কোনো রকম লড়ি চড়ি এর পাশাপাশি আমি একটা ভ্যান চালাই
Hi, I'm Linda Benkin. I am a commercial fisherman here in Sitka, Alaska. I'm also the executive director of Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association. I've been fishing for 30 years. I hope to keep fishing with my kids for another 10 years anyway. And what really matters to me is to be able to hand off to them the same opportunities that I had to fish on a healthy ocean in a small boat and to support their families and the communities the same way I did. That's the future, I imagine. But to get there, we got to take care of the ocean, and we got to take care of the people who live in the communities, the small-scale fisheries that feed the communities and feed their families from a healthy ocean.
A special thanks to our friends at WorldFish for their kind help in collecting these videos and for their tireless work with global communities on aquatic foods for healthy people and a healthy planet. Now I have the pleasure to be joined by Christina Hicks, professor at Lancaster University and an expert on sustainable livelihoods. Christina, welcome. Can you describe to us what the blue food system is? And today, as we are speaking about fairness, how fair and how just do you believe the system is?
We're trying to emphasise the role of aquatic foods within the broader food system. And aquatic foods are foods originating from marine or fresh waters. They can be wild or farmed and include fish, invertebrates and plants. Whereas a food system perspective forces us to take a holistic look at all the actors, resources and interactions that occur across the food value chain, from production to consumption and waste, accounting for the social, political and environmental drivers that shape food practices. When you ask about fairness is a big and difficult concept to evaluate, because for what's fair to me is not necessarily fair to you, a fisherman in Chile or a female trader in Senegal. So evaluations need to be inclusive and deliberative. But we can break it down a little bit more. We do know that benefits from aquatic food systems are very unequally distributed around the globe. If we map the distribution of, say, 3 benefits from the aquatic foods, including the amount of food produced, the number of people employed, and how important diets are, how reliant diets are on aquatic foods, we see that Europe produces the most food, but sub-Saharan Africa produces the least. And then if we look at the number of people employed, the pattern switches. Europe has the fewest number of people employed in the production, and European diets are least reliant on aquatic foods because they have many alternate animal source foods. Conversely, in sub-Saharan Africa, some of the largest numbers of people are employed in the production of aquatic foods, and due to the lack of nutritious alternatives, people's diets are very dependent. So these patterns are clearly unequal, and I would say that they're also unfair.
How do you think we can improve the justice and the equity in these systems? What are your ideas or reflections around this?
I think the first is ensuring that people have a political voice. By this I mean that people can actively engage in decision-making processes at different scales on matters that affect them. Since the food system is so broad, this means that we need a lot of actors involved and legitimately engaged. They also need to have access to information so that they can meaningfully respond. I think the long value chains that are quite common in many food systems makes it difficult for producers and consumers to know where their food is coming from or going to. And I think this lack of information equates to a lack of power, political voice and influence. And so this is one area that would be critical to start addressing. I think the second thing that builds on the first is that people or actors involved in the food system need to have their values, their interests and their rights recognised, but also protected in the policies that we develop to influence or shape aquatic food systems or food systems more broadly. Finally, if we can begin to recognise or identify who is losing out most, then we can target our efforts appropriately. For example, if there are social groups who are missing out from decision-making processes or bearing the greatest burdens, then this is where our efforts should start.
Christina, thank you for that. So it's about recognising and acknowledging the relevant voices, giving those voices a platform, protecting them and access to information, the political and social drivers and economic drivers. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on this important conversation, and thank you for joining us at Eat at Home, Christina. Let's travel to a beach in Chile, where Stefan Gelsic will tell us just how important small-scale fishes are for a sustainable blue food system.
Here we are in the fishing cove of Maitencillo. I think this place represents pretty well the role of small actors in food systems. Fishermen from here provide important fish and invertebrates for their own household consumption, for local markets, but also for export at international markets. There's a big heterogeneity of fishers along our coast, with women, men, some targeting algae, some targeting finfish, some targeting benthic resources. Overall, seafood provides income, provides micronutrients, and also provides cultural value in this place. If you ask me, we have to embrace the heterogeneity in the small-scale food sectors. It is important that they operate at different scales with different types of technologies, some high technology, some low technology, some with more levels of pluriactivity, some that are specific towards one resource. It's this heterogeneity that has allowed there to be more equity in terms of the distribution of income, in the distribution of seafood, and also in terms of the rules and regulations to access seafood.
Un rol fundamental, sobre todo el de los dirigentes, que se vayan capacitando, estudiando, para que haya una transformación real entre la pesca artesanal y pasar de un pescador extractor a un pescador con más conciencia y un pescador pensando en la acuicultura, en cuidar sobre manejo, en conservación. Nosotros este año postulamos un proyecto y lo ganamos en el sentido de instalar 25 arrecifes artificiales, donde es piloto, pero es toda una enseñanza para nosotros como pescadores, como para el mundo científico. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que he dicho siempre? Que no solamente debe estar la ciencia ahí, sino que complementarse junto con la pesca artesanal.
Speaking about blue foods, what about nutrition? Let's head off to the Andaman Sea to hear from Shakuntala Tilsted, a WorldFish nutritionist, on the huge potential of blue foods to nourish both people and planet.
Greetings from Penang, Malaysia, with the Andaman Sea in the background. Aquatic foods include the animals, plants, and microorganisms that are found in inland and marine waters. Aquatic foods make the diet much more nutritious. This is because aquatic foods in general contain multiple nutrients, including vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, and protein, all important for human health. Nutrient-rich aquatic foods offer a life-changing option for the 2 billion people around the globe who suffer from malnutrition. Aquatic foods are an important source of multiple micronutrients. For example, vitamin B12, which is found only in animal source foods. Vitamin B12 is essential for brain development and for cognition. Therefore, pregnant and lactating women and young children benefit from aquatic foods, which give them this vitamin B12. Dried small fish powder is a superfood packed with multiple nutrients. It is a perfect example as to how aquatic foods can nourish women and children in low and middle income countries, and especially now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Small fish species from inland and marine waters are readily available, and they are high in multiple nutrients. By drying these fish and processing them into a powder, the nutrients are concentrated, the quality is improved, and the shelf life is prolonged, making them accessible to many more people. WorldFish and partners are promoting fish powder in several countries in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Just 1 teaspoon of fish powder added to the bowl of food for the young child gives you a huge benefit in delivering essential nutrients.
কাপজাতীয় মাছ যেমন তেলাপিয়া, পাঙ্গাস ও রুই কাতলা। মাছ ওই সময় আমাদের দেখা যায় যে সময় মতো আমরা মাছটা ছাড়ার পরে যে মাছটা বড় হয় এবং তা দিয়ে অবরোধকালীন আমরা মাছটা বিক্রি করে যে টাকা উপার্জন করি কিছু ছেলেমেয়েদের লেখাপড়ার কাজে খাটাই এবং সংসার চালাই কিছু টাকা সঞ্চয় করি
Next, I'd like to welcome Roz Naylor to Eat at Home. Roz is a Stanford University professor and the co-chair of the Blue Food Assessment. Roz, welcome. My first question for you is, could you tell us about this assessment and why is it so important?
Yes, so the Blue Food Assessment, when we think of blue foods, foods that are either captured or cultivated in freshwater or marine systems, they really show a lot of promise for the future of sustainable food systems and healthy food systems. Blue foods are incredibly diverse. So if we just look along the coast of the United States or Chile, we can see mussels being grown in very sustainable situations without any inputs and providing just great seafood for consumers. But we would also find salmon production systems that might rely on a lot of antibiotics or other chemicals. And then some salmon systems that don't rely on those. So we really need to do an assessment to understand this diversity, this incredible diversity of blue foods and what it means for environmental impacts, which systems are more vulnerable to environmental change, which systems actually provide better nutrition or pose health risks to humans. And then we also want to know which systems really provide just and equitable livelihoods, which is really the focus of today's show. And I'm so honored to be part of this program with such a great panel of experts.
Do you believe that aquatic foods are a real game changer in feeding 10 billion within environmental limits? And how do we not repeat the mistakes that we've made on land in our waters?
A big part of the Blue Food is we've brought together experts from all around the world to actually evaluate the science, to evaluate the evidence, so we actually don't go down the same path that we have done on earlier, very intensive food systems that are highly consolidated and that may not have just an equitable or environmentally sound outcomes. So when I think about blue foods and their role, it's not really about calories. Most people around the world, unless they're living in areas of protracted conflict or very unstable governments or famines that are caused by climate shocks or other natural disasters, most people have enough calories. But what blue foods really provide are micronutrients and proteins, the elements that are missing in the diets of up to 3 billion people around the planet. And so the potential benefits on the nutrition side are extremely high. In that sense, we might call it a game changer, but we have to remember people have been eating aquatic foods for centuries. So those foods themselves are not a game changer. I would say the game changer is really in the mindset. How do we get global leaders, national leaders to start incorporating blue foods into the global food system? That will be the game changer. The game changer is getting the leaders to really integrate blue foods into all of their decisions on the sustainability and environmental impact of future food systems.
What do you believe can be done to create more just blue food systems, both for the producers and in terms of ensuring fair access and distribution of the benefits of blue foods?
We need to have underrepresented groups, whether it's women, marginal groups in society based on ethnic or poverty classes. We need to have these groups actually embedded into the decision processes. It's not just the policies and programs that count for getting equitable food systems in place. It's having those people that represent those communities in a decision-making position. And so I think the main point is representation and voice for the people that are underrepresented now to make sure that we have equitable food systems.
Thank you for your great contributions to this conversation. Great to have you on Eat at Home. Now that we've taken a grand tour of the blue world, it's about time to head over to the kitchen. Emilia, it's starting to smell really good.
What I've done now is that I've just fried off some finely chopped onions and garlic and carrots and celery and a tiny bit of chili. just because I love the heat. And I fry that in some olive oil until we get this beautiful fragrant mix that you can see right here. And now all we have to do is just to add 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar. And you can also use another type of vinegar, you just need the acidity. And then I'm going to add a cup of apple juice. And you can also add, for example, white wine, but I want to show you a version without any alcohol. And now we just add our mussels. And these are cleansed. It is important that you actually clean each shell very well, because they often have this cute little ocean beard that we have to remove because we don't want to eat it. And another rule is that you have to throw away the shells that are broken. I hate to do so, but it is to just avoid the possibility of getting sick of a dead shell. So yeah, now we just take our cleansed shells in our pot here, and then we just put the lid on. We are going to crank up the heat and let that steam for 2 to 3 minutes until the shells open. And in the meantime, I'm just going to chop off some parsley. We need to eat more sustainable seafood, such as shells and seaweed. Because, you know, aquaculture could provide food for the growing human population, as well as reduce overfishing. But right now, it's doing neither. And, you know, since the animals in the ocean doesn't have a voice of their own, I think it's so important that we both choose more sustainable seafood and that we also get more information on sustainable aquaculture and ocean management. But as we speak about sustainable seafood, let's check in with our mussels. Okay. Wow. Oh, I just love this feeling of opened mussels. Oh, and the smell is just amazing. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is just add a tiny bit of cream just to get that creaminess. And our chopped parsley. And you know, this is optional. I've just made this for fun. This is actually seaweed salt. So what I've done is just finely chop some dried seaweed and just mix that with sea salt. And it just adds a beautiful sort of ocean flavor to things. As well as, you know, this is containing so much iodine that is important for especially females. So that's why I'm just adding it to stuff. Yes. And there you go. Some gorgeous steamed mussels, one of the best ways to enjoy sustainable seafood.
And now for some quick news from the world of science. Land inequality is on the rise again for the first time since the 1980s. A new groundbreaking report flags that the wealthiest 1% of the world's farmers operate as much as 70% of the world's agricultural lands. This is a direct threat to the livelihoods of 2.5 billion people involved in smallholder agriculture, the research has found. And now over to EAT's founder, Gunhild Stordalen, who today sits down to speak with the inspirational Michelle Nunn, CEO of CARE USA, the international humanitarian organization fighting global poverty and world hunger by working alongside women and girls.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us at Eat at Home today, Michelle. So it's a pleasure to have you. I just want to ask you, because you are a long-term champion of humanitarian aid and international development, and now you're taking on food. So I'm really curious. When you think back across the years, describe your most amazing food experience ever.
Oh my goodness, that's such a hard one. Don't we all have these memories around tables and friends and community? I mean, one that stands out for me is we had a gathering of, it was actually my husband's 40th birthday, and a group of friends surprised him on a trip to Key West, which is in the southern tip of Florida in the United States. And there's a restaurant there called Blue Heaven, and it's an outdoor restaurant with swings and chickens that are in the yard. But it's just such a wonderful memory. You know, I was thinking about it though. I don't even necessarily remember what I ate, but the food is delicious. But it is the broader context of being in this very beautiful place with dear friends.
So when you look across all the food-related challenges out there, Michelle, what is the one thing, if you should point to one thing that infuriates you the most, that literally drives you crazy?
Yeah, I mean, I think CARE's work is so focused on women and smallholder farmers, in particular in the realm of food systems, and so the fact that 43% or 50% in places like Africa of the workforce is made up of women, the agricultural labor force, and yet 60% of the world's most chronically hungry people are women and girls. And just knowing the inequities that women face in the food systems, and that if and when they have, which we all need to fight for, equal opportunity, equal access, that we can feed literally hundreds of millions of additional people, and we can have a truly equitable system that values everyone. So that's the thing that drives me both crazy, but also that I'm hopeful about.
The good news is that you have been tasked to actually generate game-changing solutions to this problem, Michelle. So you are literally on the spot now. So I'm keen to hear more about the action track you are leading in a way that people watching it at home can understand.
I am so honored to be leading the action track that's focused on livelihoods, and that is in the food systems. It's focused on how do we ensure equitable wages for everyone? How do we ensure that those smallholder farmers, who by the way are producing the majority of the world's food, but also are disproportionately hungry, how do we ensure again fair and just systems for the production, distribution, and actual nutritional allocation of food around the world. And so working together with the other action tracks, a part of a broader, what we hope is a opportunity over the next year to bring the world to around a kind of virtual table to be a part of solutions for this incredibly important and foundational challenge for the world.
Exactly. So can you elaborate a little bit more on how are you actually going to bring the world around the table over the coming months to find and identify and crowdsource the killer solutions out there? But if I'm challenging you to give an example of what you think could be a potentially game-changing solution for some of the livelihood challenges, what would that be?
Yeah. So yeah, you are putting me on the spot. And I think there are a lot, and there's technological innovation and change. But I'll share one that CARE's already a part of, and it's a very, in many ways, quite simple. And it is the creation of and expansion of savings groups. Women are a part of savings groups around the world. CARE actually has sort of an organizational structure in which we have over 7 million women that are a part of what we call our village savings and loan groups. And they're simply groups of women that come together, often around tables, often with tea or coffee or snacks, and they save money together and they lend it out to one another for their small businesses, mainly in smallholder agriculture. And so we would like and think that it's possible and have a pathway to expand from the 7 million that CARE is currently working with to 60 million people. And so these women groups allow women to have diversification of income. So if they're dependent upon, for instance, one crop and that crop doesn't come in this year, they also might have a small entrepreneurship opportunity with bees and honey. And so they have, again, more diversity, which gives more resiliency. It also allows them to come together to use the marketplace and, for instance, to save money to pool more cooperative capital equipment that enables them to sort of move up the supply chain and have greater market access. this. So these are, it's a very simple idea, again, coming together on a weekly basis to save resources and to lend it out to one another, but it is an incredibly empowering opportunity. In addition to that, there's ways in which we can use those forums for better training around nutrition and how they can use the ingredients that are all around them, but for better nutrition, for intervention around, for instance, their sexual and reproductive health, so that they can ensure that from a maternal and child health perspective, that they're making the best use nutritionally of those first 1,000 critical days for their children. So again, a very simple solution, but a big opportunity, and I think just emblematic of everything from very high-tech opportunities that are before us to very simple, already existing solutions that we can spread and expand.
So what are you and your action track going to do between now and the summit to allow people around the world to really weigh in so that this summit actually matter?
I hope that one of the things that the summit can do and that our action track can do is to tell some of these stories so that people can feel their own sense of agency and power and participation, so that they can feel that they are in fact not powerless but quite powerful as consumers, as voters, as citizens, and as potential, again, change agents within the system. Every single one of us can relate to the issue of food. We do it multiple times a day. We know our own dependency upon it. We know that it is what brings our families together, what brings our communities together. And we recognize, therefore, that we all have a role in it. We are all a part of this food system that we are talking about at this macro level. And so we all do have both a responsibility and also an opportunity to make it more powerful, and I would say to make it ultimately more equitable, which is what I think we can all agree that everybody should have nutritional food for their growth and for their reach their full potential. And that is a basic human right. And that we, if we do nothing else, that to ensure the vitality and the equity of our food system is a paramount goal for us, and that we do all have a place. And so I think that's why we're trying, as you are so powerfully in forums like this, to remind everybody, you have a role, you have a place, come join us at this larger global table.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So nice talking to you, and thanks for the amazing work you are doing with CARE and as chair for Action Track 4 on livelihoods.
Today, we've explored why we need a more fair food system. So what are the crucial next steps? Well, to lead the way, I'm joined by two remarkable people for a final conversation in this episode of Eat at Home. Welcome to the IFAD President, Gilbert Houngbo, and Myrna Cunningham, Chair of IFAD's Indigenous Peoples Forum. Welcome. Gilbert, our first question is directed to you. What solutions can ensure that the shift to sustainable consumption also improves the livelihoods of the small-scale food producers?
The technology available to produce sustainable food is made also available to the small-scale producers. That's going to be crucial. Another point that I would like to point out is we need to make sure that it's not just a matter of food security, it's not just a matter of nutritious food, it's not just a matter of sustainability in the production, but it is also a matter of ensuring that the small-scale producers could increase their income, could increase their revenues. So it's going to be crucial for us to make sure that they do have their fair share in the value chain.
Gilbert, thank you for highlighting those points for us. Myrna, what from the perspective of indigenous peoples would be the most game-changing solutions that would positively, or rather most positively, impact the lives of indigenous people?
Thank you very much. Indigenous peoples should be able to freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development as an integral part of their right to self-determination including the right to determine and develop economic priorities and strategies, and the right to financial and technical assistance, what should promote their autonomy and not contribute to dependency relationship with the state, markets, or financial institutions. This is important to consider all what indigenous peoples are already doing in land tenure security, responsible governance system, traditional technology that they are combining with modern technology, for example, for water protection, or what they're doing to support, for example, different varieties of seeds, of potato, that are food that can be resilient when there's climate change. So I think what we need to do is to generate evidence-based examples of legal, institutional, and enabling conditions that have allowed indigenous peoples to exercise their rights over their means of production for traditional economies. And this should promote better understanding of the benefits of indigenous peoples' practice of collectivity, solidarity, and sustainable coexistence with natural environment.
Myrna, thank you for that. Gilbert, back to you. Are the challenges in land-based agriculture the same as those in aquaculture, or would you say that there are specific nuances?
A very good question. In fact, there are much more similarity than we might think of. In both cases, you need land, you need water, you need finance, you need machinery, if not modern technology. And in both cases, also, you are exposed to the different type of shocks, particularly extreme weather shocks. The other thing that comes to my mind, which is also similar, both you talk about aquaculture or land-based agriculture, is the fact that in both cases, you are exposed to the challenge we are seeing in terms of food loss. So the importance of keeping the aquaculture product fresh, be it fish, for example, or if you are in vegetable production, you have to keep it fresh. So the whole issue about the conservation, the storage, or the basic transformation, whatever it does apply, is critical on both sides. That being said, on both sector, what we notice, be it the small-scale agriculture producers or the small-scale fishermen and women, they are really, it's a very hard work that they are striving on a daily basis, and they are quite very fragile.
Myrna, over to you. From the perspective of women, what do you believe would be the most game-changing solutions?
The most game-changing solution is that everyone, each person, should be taken into account. So women need to be fully integrated in our decision-making, and we should promote and facilitate more women in leadership positions. There's a need to continue enhance gender equality and empowerment of women at all levels to reduce the risk of gender-based violence and to lower the work burden of women due to their traditional roles, including care work that is usually not measured and affect their culture. So there are a lot of knowledge in women, and especially in indigenous women, and they are the ones that transmit this knowledge to the new generations. So they deserve the right to land, territories, natural resources. And so I think that is what we need to do at our level to strengthen indigenous women organization and ensure their full participation in decision making.
Thank you for that, Myrna, and also your call to action. Let's hope that the right people are listening. So Gilbert, with the UN Food Systems Summit coming up in 2021 as the big event, what, Gilbert, would be your ideal outcome from the UN Food Systems Summit in terms of commitments by governments and major food industry actors to change the equation, specifically for small-scale food producers?
Put it this way, the first point, which I believe is already been achieved, is to have the issue of SDG 2, zero hunger, and the issue of nutrition, the issue of the small-scale holder, and the issue of the indigenous people, having that high on the agenda, or the international agenda. So I'm very confident that the Food Systems Summit is already, even the preparatory work that is ongoing, is already bringing that back on the agenda, which is one. Secondly, if we can at least address the major market failures, which for decades now we know that the global worldwide food production is more than what we need to feed the 7 billion or 10 billion to be by 2050. But yet people are dying of hunger. People cannot ensure one meal a day. That market, the major dimension of the market failures, if we can identify them and commit ourselves, be it from government perspective and the private sector, for me to be an important one. Secondly, it will be great to come up with the different the trade-offs, because we know we're going to have trade-offs from the production or the food security dimension, the health dimension of the nutrition, or the sustainability dimension, let alone the economic dimension, creating jobs for the youth in a rural area. Those, you will need trade-offs. But if the food system can come with what are the major trade-offs, and each party committing itself to that, for me, is a major expectation that I have. A third expectation that I have, and I will limit myself there, a third expectation that I will have is to what extent, and on a voluntary basis, to what extent the private sectors can better contribute to ensuring, to making sure that, or helping us to ensure that the small-scale producers can increase their income from their daily activity en route for the SDG 2.3, which calls for helping those small-scale producers to double their income by 2030.
Gilbert and Myrna, thank you so much for your important contributions to this powerful conversation of how we can get a fairer deal for small-scale food producers on land and in the ocean. Thank you so much for joining us. Emilie, after another really interesting episode, I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on today's episode?
I must say that I'm just so happy that we're beginning to talk more about ocean management. And I think it's so interesting that by protecting more, we can produce more and thus feed more people. But there is no doubt that we have to protect the lives in our ocean, especially since they don't have a voice of their own. And I know that I will begin to think about more new recipes with other treasures from the ocean, because there's so much more to explore.
Thank you for that great answer, and I completely agree. I think it's about sustainably managed oceans going forward. So, before we go, a quick word on some of our side sessions. On Wednesday, we're kickstarting a dialogue on seaweed and plant-rich aquatic foods. And this Thursday, join us at 2 p.m. when Pauleg illustrates how both conscious and unconscious choices are actually shaping a sustainable and flavorful food culture. Just after that, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development will explore policy dimensions of food systems. And concluding the week, something that is close to my heart, Compassion in World Farming and the UN Environment Programme will ask a timely question: how to love food and nature at the same time.
That's an interesting and so important question.
I couldn't agree more, Emilie. Well, everyone, we are rounding up here. So next week at Eat at Home, it's all about healthy food and really making it accessible to everyone everywhere. So all that's left for us to say is, see you then, and have a lovely rest of the day.